So in this week's tutorial slash demo, I really just kind of wanted to have some fun, felt like doing a little bit of Photoshop, and then kind of thought I could walk through kind of my creative process. So I created this nostalgia room of things that I really like. I'm not going to dive too deep into my Photoshop techniques, but I'm going to give you kind of a high level of how I think, how I break these things down in order to make something that appears kind of complex. In reality, isn't really that complex. So let's dive in. I'm going to refresh and unmute my computer.
So today I have a cool tip for embedding YouTube videos and
So if you notice, the YouTube video is playing. I got a little bit of a music playing in the background. I don't want that anymore. I'm gonna mute that. On the walls, I have some art from some of my friends, some of the cool stuff they're doing, and then I have these video games down here that you can drag onto the entertainment system and then kind of watch some gameplay of the games. So here I am in Photoshop. You see the hands that play the Nintendo game, you see the speaker that plays the music, and you see the games that you can drag and drop onto the NES to get them to play on the TV. Then basically I have a background. I just found a good image on the internet that I liked, and then I just layered stuff on top of it. Essentially I just layered art. So I'm not gonna show you how I did all of these things, but I'm gonna show you some tips that I always use when compositing things within Photoshop. So here is the Hope poster with Princess Leia. If I show it, notice how there is a curves adjustment attached to that layer. That's something you'll typically do when compositing images, because you'll take a photo and photo A does not match the lighting, the exposure, the color balance of picture B, so you need to kind of match those things up, and a curves adjustment is the best way to do that. So if I turn off the curves adjustment, notice how the Hope poster is a little too bright. Now it doesn't look like it actually fits within the wall. I turn it back on and it fits within the scene a little better. It's a little more washed out, just like the entire scene is. If I double click this curves layer, I can come and I can adjust more things. I can make it darker, whatever I need to do to make it fit my scene. You get the point. I can adjust these colors to make it match. So if the room was really blown out, then I upped the brightness and things like that to make it match the room. Had maybe too much of a red tint because of the camera that was used, I could come into the red and pull some of the reds out, etc. So using a curves adjustment allow me to make them feel a little more grounded in the scene. Another thing that you'll often want to do is adding a little bit of shadow to things. So under the NES, I have a little bit of a shadow, but also on this Spark of Madness poster, I painted a little bit of a shadow on top of it, because if you notice, there's a shadow running across the wall. I have these this little plant over here that's on top of this Super Mario poster. I just made a little rectangle portion of the background image. Select color range. I grabbed the red, so I zoomed way in there, I made it kind of fuzzy, clicked OK, and then I had a pretty decent selection of all the reds in the scene. And you may be like, well, there's all these reds up here, all these reds all over here, but it doesn't matter because that layer is just this tiny little rectangle right here. So once I have that selection, inside my rectangle, the only red stuff is this plant. So with that selection, I was able to create a mask, and then that makes it look like the plant is showing up on top of the Mario poster. And then I also did a curves adjustment for that to make it look like it fit within the scene a little bit better. I also did a little bit of a warp on the poster, so I transformed it and I did a warp to kind of skew it just a little bit so it wasn't just a perfect rectangle. Things aren't perfect in real life. So that's essentially it for Photoshop to get everything laid out. Now I need to export everything. So really, if you look at the scene, what I need is I need my background, I need my games individually, I need the hands, and I want the speaker because I want to be able to click it. So first thing, I would hide everything and then use Command Option Shift S to save for web and devices, substitute Control if you're on a PC, save that image out. I'd show my games, I'd come in here. Now here's a tip that I like to use. I'm gonna hide the background. If you Control or Command click on a layer's window here, you will get a selection of the visible pixels within that layer. So if I Command click Mario, now I have a selection of Mario. I can then hit the C tool to crop, hit Enter, Enter. I can then save for web and devices, hit Enter, Enter, and then I have a saved image again really quickly. Then I undo, undo, do the same thing for the next image, crop, Enter, Enter, save for web and devices, and you can really export out all your images from Photoshop really quickly. So I did that and got all the images out, and then I drugged them all into Storyline. So I've restarted this thing so you could kind of see it from scratch. Now, when I create a complex interaction, and this isn't really that complex, I break it down into tiny pieces that make it much easier. So the first thing I did in my room is I just had all of this stuff imported and positioned where I wanted it to go. So the first thing I want to do is have a piece of music play in the background. In order to do that, I just simply add the audio file to my base layer, and then I have a trigger when the timeline starts that says play media, my audio file, when the timeline starts. And then also I have another trigger that says play media when the media completes. So that way, if it completes and you're playing with my interaction for a long time, the audio will kind of fade out and loop and fade back in. Now, if you click the speaker, it adjusts a variable that says, is the audio playing, true or false? If it's set to false, it stops the audio from playing, and if it's set to true, it resumes the audio playing. Now, you may be wondering, why are you using a variable? I could have used states. You're right, I just used a variable because that's how I set up the YouTube stuff. So with that, the audio part is set up. I don't have to touch that. That piece of the interaction's done. Easy. The next thing is I wanted to be able to hover over the artwork to see information about my friend's artwork and to provide links to follow them on Twitter or click to purchase their artwork. So how could I do that? Well, that's super basic. You just hover over, show a layer. I don't want to restore on mouse leave because I want you to be able to click the stuff here. So I basically added a hover trigger that shows a layer. I did not set restore on mouse leave because I wanted you to be able to hover over this text here and interact with this text here. So I actually set a action to close the layer when you hover over this background that shows up. To get the highlighted version of the art, I just copied the background image, pasted it into my layer, cropped the image, and then added an effect. It was super easy, took a couple seconds, and within a couple minutes, now I have my audio playing and I have my art layers available to interact with. Now after that, there's really not a whole lot left. I want the interaction to start with my YouTube embedding tutorial on the TV because I kind of used that tutorial in order to add the YouTube videos. So all I did was I used that tutorial and added a web object like I prescribed in that tutorial here, and then I added a bit of the frame of the TV around it because YouTube was adding a little bit of a white line, so this frame kind of shows up on top of the video, makes it look a little bit better, and then that's it. So in order to get that to show up when my interaction starts, I just immediately show that layer when the timeline starts of my slide. So the last thing I need to do is show the proper YouTube video if they drag a game or click the Spark of Madness poster. First thing I did was I duplicated my intro video YouTube thing for Spark of Madness, Mario, Zelda, Metroid, and Contra, and then just updated the embed URL of my web object to show a different YouTube video. So I'm just adjusting the ID of the video here. Boom, bang, easy peasy, it's done. So then I come here, and basically I could have done a bunch of triggers on each of these things. You drag Metroid over the TV, and it shows the Nintendo hands, and it shows the layer, and it hides Metroid because it's actually in the TV, so I don't want it to also show. And then it shows all the other games in case one of them was actually already being played. So that would have been like 6 to 7 triggers on each thing. Instead, I created a variable called YouTube that kept track of what I wanted to play on the TV. So really, when you break down the logic, the variable changes. If the variable changes and it's one of these games, I need to show these hands because they're playing a video game. If the variable changes and it's not one of these games, it's Spark of Madness. Hide the hands, show Spark of Madness. If the variable changes and it's one of these games, I want to hide the game that it changed to, just because I don't want them to drag the same game onto the TV twice. It wouldn't do anything, but I want it to hide, that way it's obvious that it's the one in the TV. Now, also, when one of the games change, well, I want to make sure that the game that is not in the TV is normal, which means it's showing, which means that I can drag it and drop it. And then if it changes and it was a video game before, but now it becomes Spark, I hide the hands. So that sounds kind of complex, but it's not that difficult. I totally recommend you dig into the triggers. It's not too bad. There's 15 to 20 triggers to make all of that work, and then the rest of it's really just showing layers. And that's really it. It's pretty simple. I also added kind of this variable tracker here so I can make sure things were updating the way I expected. So when I was testing, I just drug this onto the screen so I could see what the value of the variables were. And then when I was done, I just got rid of it and drug it back up there so I couldn't see it. Here is the correct drop spot for these video games. I just, in order to get the dragging capability, just set up a drag and drop. You drag them to that hotspot to get it correct. And then I set up drag and drop options. So I want it to snap back if it's not on the correct drop target. Basically, I just set up the drag and drop to get the free snapping back. The only thing I want to note is I noticed in the HTML5 version, all of these YouTube videos, because they're set to autoplay, start autoplaying immediately. So Storyline is publishing these web objects into the page automatically, and they're just kind of hidden from view and they're not actually showing. So if you publish the HTML5 version of this course, and I'll give you the source files if you want to try it out, all of those videos start playing immediately. Now I didn't fix it for this tutorial, but it is possible. I could add some extra JavaScript to kind of control the playback of all the YouTube embeds to only show and play the one that's on the screen, but that's kind of complex. I'd really prefer if the Storyline output would kind of not add the web object content to the slide until you're actually ready to show the layer. So hopefully showing you my process a little bit was beneficial. Please follow me on Twitter. Please like, subscribe, tell your friends, sign up for the email newsletter. If you're not on social media, that way every 2 weeks you just see these tutorials in your inbox. Pick the ones you like, trash the ones you don't. And thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, thank you. It means a lot. So thanks so much. Have a good rest of the week, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.